Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. My name is Sarah. If you're new here, I'm so glad you're here. For this Season 3, we are doing group conversations on the podcast where we get to be big and brave together. And today we are talking about a topic that has been kind of progressively more on my mind in the last year or so, but I am no expert about this. And I am so happy to have some people here who also care enough to want to have this conversation and to help us lead this conversation. So we're going to be talking about like environment stuff today, but including for digital entrepreneurs. So if you're like, oh wait, I don't do anything physical, or I my whole business is online, or I primarily run my business online, don't hang up, right? Like, don't go away. This is for all of us. So I think before we get into the big brave question, let's just do a lay of the land of who is here. Like I mentioned, if you're new here, I'm Sarah. I'm the host of the podcast, and I also run a podcast production and strategic consultation company called Podfox Media.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yuval Ackerman, and I'm an ethical email marketing strategist and consultant.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shelby Watson-Hampton, and I have a brand called The Farmed Life. And I actually work with women in agriculture, ranching, and rural small business and entrepreneurship. So a lot of my folks are actually working with the land. And sustainability is a big conversation point for us.
Cool. Hi, I'm Chereen, and my business is Smeeny Made Wild, and I'm a maker and creative entrepreneur, and I'm also now a mentor and retreat host for outdoorsy creatives in the outdoor space that have values-aligned businesses.
Thank you so much for being here. And just as a quick reminder, if you want to learn more about any of us or connect with any of us, we would love to chat with you and to meet you and to know you and to be friends. So all of our information is in the description or the show notes of the episode. So you can find all that there. But let's get into it. So the big question we're digging into today is, what role do small businesses play in climate action, and what sustainable strategies actually work?
So coming from the farming and ranching kind of world, sustainable and regenerative words like that have been buzzwords for a long time, right? At least a decade for us at this point. And for us, when we talk about sustainability, we're not just talking about what's good for the environment and what's good for the climate as a whole, but it has to be sustainable for your business as well, right? So a lot of farms are doing wonderful practices, but they're either not getting paid for them or they're not getting recognized for them. And it tends to actually be harder on the business owner and the small business owner than it is for larger corporations, because you have bigger access and, a bigger platform, and you have certifications that you can pay for and afford to pay for that. A lot of our farmers are doing organic practices, but they don't actually pay for the organic certification because the paperwork is like 3 inches thick. And, it can be expensive. So we are talking about sustainability as also what you're doing for your business has to be sustainable when you put your time and energy into it. If you don't have a business and you don't have any ethical business practices to help the environment around you. So it's kind of the flip side of the coin. So we focus a lot on how to solve that.
That is so cool that you're from the ranching and ag background, because my past life, I was a chef and also worked on regenerative farms and had a lot of farm to table. I had a farm to table catering business basically, but now I've moved more into this product-based space and experience space. And I think I've taken a lot of that regenerative and this thinking about the land, working with the seasons mindset, and incorporated that into my business. And I feel like as a business owner, especially if you're a creative or a solopreneur, sustainability goes along the lines of not only just the actual sustainability of what you are selling, it's also the sustainability of your own energy and how you're showing up for your people. And I think a lot of this, and it goes well with the farm community too, where farming is based on community. And so are our small businesses. And like you're saying, it's so different from being a corporation. As a small business owner, you're creating a community, and that's who your people are and how you are being supported and how you are supporting them. And I feel like in that sense, we do have a lot of responsibility in talking about our values, especially when it comes to sustainability and how we do things, because that ultimately is what is going to build a stronger system.
I'm so glad I've listened to you both talking about this, because I'm basically thinking about it in the same way that you both have mentioned, but through the lens of digital marketing, which is what I do. A lot of the times there are no sustainable strategies out there for small business owners, and I think a lot of marketers, let's put it out there, just plainly, have caused a lot of small business owners to burn out with strategies that don't work because they're not sustainable enough for them, because they don't meet those people where they're at. I also think that at the same time, Sarah, you asked us, what role do small businesses play in the world of sustainability? And I think this role is actually growing these days, because we want to connect with people. We don't want to connect with or buy from those big companies that necessarily we know or we don't know what they do to our environment, to our communities, if anything. And I don't know about the other people in this call, I feel like we're actually going back to this communal space rather than trusting big brands. I'm very happy about this change. And if anything, I think this is the big comeback of the small business.
I think you're correct. And I think the late stage capitalism, especially here in the US, has driven us to that. It's come full circle, right? Now we're back to the land, we're back to community, we're back to the women and matriarchal structures, and knowing that that's more nurturing than what we've been served, for the last couple hundred years, and finding our roots in that. And I'm excited to see kind of where it goes.
Yeah, and as small businesses too, like what both of you are saying, I 100% agree. I'm over here fist pumping. It's like we also just have such a more intimate relationship with our clients, our customers, with our supply chains and the people that we deal with. And I have both a product-based and service-based business. So in my product-based business, I make handmade knit beanies mostly, and I've always sourced from small family-run wool yarn companies that have organic practices, that are creating safe, ethical workspaces for women, that have their own sheep and are farming them in a way that is sustainable and ethical. And also just from like packaging and all of that stuff and what you are using from a material standpoint, but also it kind of grew into this community where I was like, I am selling a product, but my branding for it is I live in a mountain town and I love getting outdoors and creating inclusive outdoor spaces. And so the products actually became almost like this welcome card into this bigger movement about outdoors and women in the outdoors, inclusivity in the outdoors. And then it kind of snowballed, and I became a 1% for the Planet business partner and donate back to these causes that I care about, which then led to being able to talk about all of these different causes and organizations and being advocates for change. And in some way, well, I think in many ways, being a small business owner allows you to use your platform to be an advocate for change. And like we were talking about, how we have these intimate relationships with our customers, clients, and even our vendors, we actually are able to make a bigger impact. And it might feel like, what can we do as a small business? But we actually can do a lot.
Yeah, because the ripple effect is just, it's one person at a time. Yeah, I see you, Shelby. You're like, great minds. Yeah, it is one person at a time, and it's not about bigger, but I think it's all about better and deeper this time around. And I really do hope this trend is not only a trend, but is a whole movement that now is going to have more and more ripple effects. So, oh, this conversation, I love this.
Yes. What you made me think about too was the word intentional. And I feel like Sarah too, with your podcast in general, like there's so much intentionality behind the topics and the whole premise of the podcast. So it's cool being able to be in this room and talking to all of you, because intentionality now, we have this ability to be intentional and to make bigger impact.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just like taking it all in. I've already gotten some ideas from listening to you all about things that will kind of help soothe, because one of the things that's coming up for me when it comes to this topic is guilt, shame, the more that I learn of like, how am I contributing? And in particular, one of the things that has, of course, been a topic of conversation that's on the rise, and I'm so glad that it is because it's important, is the impact of generative AI on the environment, right? And raising temperatures, water usage, things like that. And I think this really matters. The more that I've learned about it, and we did a whole episode on AI ethics in the past, and that was part of it, although I'm interested to hear what you all think about AI. But from the more research I've done about it, which literally has kept me up at night of like, what do I do? Because like, I don't want to be behind the curve. A huge part of what I believe and what I've talked to some other experts about is like, those of us who care about ethics are disproportionately positioned to reduce our AI implementation and adoption because we're concerned about the ethics behind it. But that actually, the people who are most concerned about that are already economically behind, and it will actually continue to further that gap. And that is a huge concern for me. But at the same time, ethics obviously are at the forefront of how I do things in my life and especially in my business. So, and I don't ever want to lose that, because to all your points of how we kind of open this, that is what sets small businesses apart, is we get to put ethics first and we get to put our core values first. And that does make us different from corporations. So as I've learned more about kind of AI's impact, what I have actually learned is that when it comes to the like biggest offenders of like data center usage and the heating, et cetera, is actually streaming platforms. And so predominantly we're looking at like Netflix, Hulu, et cetera. That's going to be a way bigger usage of what heats up the planet and uses water compared to like generative AI. Not that generative AI does not matter. Of course it does for a lot of reasons. But as far as if that's what your concern is the impact of like all the data that's being used and the processing power, streaming is a bigger concern. Well, guys, I literally produce podcasts. That is streaming. So what am I doing? What am I creating? What am I continuing to generate and put out and help other people put out that is perpetuating this kind of like big data, that this streaming data, these streaming platforms, and like, how do I manage that? So anyways, these are some of the things that are progressively coming up for me. And I start to think about things like digital clutter. How many emails am I archiving instead of deleting? Because just in case I might ever need it. How many, like, what are the things that I'm doing digitally? And I don't have a physical product based part of Podfox. So like that aspect is pretty minimal as far as like ordering supplies and things, which I can make better decisions when I can. And it's balancing what you have economic access to and what, right, that all matters. But then, okay, if the bulk of my business is online, it's easy to kind of write it off and say, okay, check, like I'm not doing like a physical footprint, but you do have a physical footprint though. So anyways, what's coming up for all of you when I word vomit all of that at you?
So it's like the existential question of our time. And it's not just generative AI. It's the digital footprint across the board. You know, how much time do we spend on social media? How much time do we spend online? At what age should kids have access to it? You know, it's the cooling centers for the computers and the Wi-Fi have come before the cooling centers for, you know, generative AI. And you mentioned, you know, being behind the curve, like not being able to function in modern society if you don't know how to use these tools and if you don't know how to access things. So I think it's kind of an inevitable evolution, and that we're going to navigate it as best we can. Those like us who are conscious of it to try to offset anything we might be causing. You know, it's like you're doing the things that you can, you know, recycling and buying ethically, and, you know, not spending your dollar with companies who don't, you know, contribute to environmental cleanup efforts and things like that. I don't think we can stop it. I think that cat is way out of the bag. And I think the best we can do is try to be part of the group that uses it responsibly, because people are going to use it. So, you know, maybe we can help be, you know, gatekeepers along the way. I don't know. I have no real actual answer. That's just where my thoughts are.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's like what you're saying, it's this evolution, and we are in late stage capitalism. We are a overconsumption materialistic society, and no one person or one business or one entity can do it all. It's like, how do we all improve and do one or many steps and many things better? And even like what we're talking about with social media and these things, it's like, oh, I don't want to be on Meta platforms anymore because of these practices, or I don't want to support Amazon and Target because of all this stuff. And so it's like, okay, how can we minimize our footprint, but also still progress? And ultimately, a lot of those conversations were like, if we are still here taking up space and using our platforms for change and positive impact, I don't want to be here making and creating things with AI, but if I'm using it as a tool here and there to help speed a process or create a system or something, then maybe that's better than me being like someone who's over here having an entire business model making AI art or whatever. And there's just, it's so complex and nuanced, and there's so many different things. And it also just makes me think about how being a primarily product-based business for a long time, I was having this huge existential crisis with overconsumption and capitalism. And when I started hosting these retreats and experiences, I was like, oh my God, like this is actually what I want to move towards, and to maybe make the product side less of a revenue stream and to actually create communities and experiences in real life. And that kind of is what spurred me into moving more towards experiences and service, because I was like, I just the making will never go away, and using that as a way to share about the sustainable practices. But it's going back again to communities and building that and just navigating it all together. Kind of like what we're doing now. Literally just having this conversation about it and talking about it is part of that.
Yes to everything that has been said in the past few minutes. And I want to tie back to a few things that Sarah said. First and foremost, we're small fish. We're really small fish. As much as we are conscious of our consumption, the big change will have to also happen at the top. On the individual level, on the small business level, it's phenomenal that we care about this so much, but the big change has to happen at the top. And we have to meet somewhere in the middle, all of us, and work with each other to make sure that the change and the positive impact is happening. Another point about the guilt and the shame. I always tell my clients the fact that we're even talking about AI and what it causes, or how our usage of digital marketing is affecting our society, our world, the people around us. The fact that we're even having this conversation to begin with is already ahead of the curve, is already better than so many other people who are just blindly using tools just for the sake of using new tools and shiny objects and whatnot. And I think, just to finish it off, it's important just to have a conversation about, are we using this? Are we not using this? This is one of the first things that I do with my new clients. When I onboard them, I tell them, look, AI is here. It's not going anywhere. We can use it. We can use it to this extent. We can use it to that extent. It's a spectrum. We have many choices. You do need to know that when we use this AI for these purposes, this AI has been trained, presumably, allegedly, on XYZ. The causes and actually the effects of using such AI could result in that. How do you feel about that? I think none of us have solutions or answers. The important thing for us is to truly talk about it, be aware of what we're doing, how we're doing things, and reassess as we grow, because this is how we're doing things. And just last point, right? We are in late stage capitalism, as we know, as we've mentioned. I want us to not be ashamed of wanting to make money, to then put it back into positive impact. I think there is a way for us to use AI with all of the damage it causes or can cause, and put all of the outputs of that usage back into positive impact. I think and I see that it is possible. And if anything, if the entire world could switch to using AI to create positive change, I think we would have been on a much better trajectory.
This is so helpful, and I just want to thank each of you for your contribution, and I especially want to just like triple underline what you said there, Yuval, about like we are small fish, and I think I kind of needed to hear that back because it's something that I've said in other contexts. I say this all the time about kind of carbon footprint when we think about travel, and I specifically want to say like if you didn't know this, I'm a Swiftie, so if you follow me, you might know, but unapologetically, I love her, but I'm also anti-billionaire. And it's an interesting thing because I do think, like, generally speaking, billionaires should not exist. I could go on a whole thing about why I think there's kind of a special circumstance of her, but that it doesn't matter. But what I will say is when people come for her specifically about her carbon footprint, her carbon footprint is astronomical as an individual. It is. There's no denying that. And it's still a fraction of what a corporation is doing. And so if we're hung up on the witch hunt of coming after individuals instead of what we should actually all be mad about, which is corporations, right? Then I think like it's distraction politics. And I think individual women, especially, yes. Yeah, I agree with that you've all put that in the chat. I think that if it's distraction politics and it's a way for us to attack each other in class warfare, while the people who are making decisions about policy and who are running corporations and who are running multi-million, multi-billion dollar corporations get to continue to like ransack our planet while we fight with each other, right? This like kind of class infighting. And I have said this, and so but in other contexts, and so I think this is really helpful to have that kind of mirrored back to me of like, it's great that you care and you should care and you should have these conversations and you should make the best decisions you can based on the information and the economic access that you have. And you are not the problem, right? So, like, generally speaking, you are not the problem. The problem is so much bigger than just you. And you can do the things that you can do to mitigate and to support and to help. And I think to consume as ethically as you can, right? We've said on this podcast before, there's no such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism. We can only do the best we can do, right? We can only do the best we can do. And choosing where we then spend our money is also such a good callback of like, we've talked about this on this podcast before, that's one of the important things about running a business that's based on core values is that your customers or your clients get to choose where they spend their money, and they want to spend it as ethically as possible. So they want to spend it with you if you show them that you are trying to be an ethical person and run an ethical business, right? And so I think like making choices outside of your business in your own life to decrease your carbon footprint and to care about the planet and to care about other humans and to put people over profit and to put planet over profit like that. If you are living your life that way and you show people that, that's also going to come back to you in the form of capitalistic support. Thank you for paying me because you appreciate my ethics, right? And I will return the favor, right? I'm going to then invest the money that I make in as many ethical places as possible and to try to use my dollars to hold people accountable as much as I can. That's really interesting to me.
I think, yes, to all of that. And yes, to spending your money, like, Taylor Swift is so much good. I mean, she's trying to offset her impact that it is. But I agree with you on basically the rest of the current stuff. But one thing I found interesting that you've all said is that, don't be afraid to make money. Don't be afraid to use those dollars for positive change. And there's a quote from Citizens Bank online that says, women aren't just managing wealth, they're using it to create change, whether it's investing in women in businesses, supporting organizations that advance gender equity, or creating family foundations that reflect personal values. Research shows that households headed by women get more money in philanthropic endeavors than the more benefits. So it's more women with more wealth creating more positive change, and that's what we see.
Yes, and that also just made me think about people like Dolly Parton, who she is making money, a lot of money, but she is also doing all of this good. And I know that we all wish that we could just sit in our little communes and have urban farms together and take care of each other in the like old ways like that. But we exist in this society. And so it's like, how do we do things in a way that can work with the place that we're living in now? And I agree, like we have to, if we are the ones that can create change by having the money to make more changes and to bring these more people into our community and our folds where we're talking about these things, those ripples are going to have a much bigger effect. And I kind of want to go back to the guilt again, because I think if you've ever watched The Good Place, remember how it's like everything is problematic at a certain level? Like it just is. But how can we make as many choices as possible that are conscious and intentional? And no one's going to be perfect ever. That's just a fact. Like there's just no way. But if we are conscious of these choices, if we are intentional about them, and we have the mentality of wanting to do better every day, that in itself is going to make a difference.
And one more thing that I would like to mention or remind everyone on this call or everyone listening, despite economic crisis, despite the shit show that has been the past 5 years, that felt like the past 50, really, people are going to spend money. People are spending money. And they're spending money on shit that they don't need and shit that is really hurting our planet, other people. So people are spending money, and they will spend this money regardless of your business. So if you're a business for good, if you're creating positive change and impact, not only for yourself and your loved ones, but for communities, places, overseas, whatever it is, you name it. I think, and this is also what I tell my clients who are thinking, do we run this promotion on Black Friday because we don't want to send more emails, or whichever reason it is. And it's all justified. Like I just want to make it really, really clear. Not running a Black Friday promo, totally respect that and support that too, by the way. And people are going to spend money anyways. They might as well use this money to enjoy a good product that was created by a good company that is also then rolling that positive impact forward. So let's please get rid of the guilt and shame of wanting to make money and also wanting to improve whatever it is around us, please.
So when we think about what like green business practices actually look like, what is that? And what are some of the barriers to actually implementing those things? Now that we've got the don't let this make you feel guilty or shamed, but just so that we can have the conversation and have more info about it. What does it look like, and what stops it from being realistic sometimes?
Well, I love Chereen's reference to The Good Place, because the bar is constantly moving, right? It's constantly changing. You think you locked in an ethical practice, and then a next one comes along or takes it to the next level, or it turns out the first one wasn't as good as you thought it was. And it's like a moving target. So I think a big part of it is intentionality and education. Just kind of staying plugged in a little bit to learn, as science changes, processes change, and we come out with better, more sustainable practices. And I think it's like one of those things, when you see it, like if you're really plugged in and you care enough and you're doing the best you can in the area that you can, you are doing what you can. And that in that moment in time, and then as things progress, you learn more. It's easy as us to know it personally. The harder thing is when you're looking at the companies that you're buying from, especially the larger ones, to make sure they're not greenwashing, and just putting out, for the PR, like this is what they're doing. Are they actually doing it? Is it actually good practice? And I can be kind of exhausting to try to work through all of that. So I don't have the perfect answer to it. I think you just try the best you can, and do the best you can with the knowledge that you have.
Yeah, and on top of that, I agree with everything you just said. And on top of that, it's also just transparency and having a conversation at all with your clients and customers. And like for me, with my product-based side, I try to be as transparent as possible about where I source my materials from, the packaging, like everything has an intention behind it. But the barrier to it, like what Sarah is saying, the barrier is the higher cost. Like to source 100% recycled and ethically made packaging materials is going to be way more than what you can buy off of Amazon. Or the yarn that I source is very expensive, but then that becomes like a talking point to my customers of why I'm choosing to use these materials. And I didn't always do it that way. When I first started, I was kind of using a bunch of different things. And then later on, it became a non-negotiable for me to use this material versus the other. But that doesn't mean when I first started out, I was being unethical or unconscious. It was more just like, I need to figure out what this looks like for me and how this is even possible. And as things grew, as things progressed, I was like, this is actually non-negotiable. So I'm only going to be using this type of yarn. And then there was the accessibility question. Like now I'm making things that are a much higher price point. Does that affect accessibility and my whole thing about being inclusive? And so it's like it just goes back to nothing is going to be perfect and nothing is ever going to be 100% everything for everybody. And it shouldn't be. But I think the biggest piece is being transparent about the why behind these choices and just encouraging people to continue talking about it.
I think for my clients it's similar to what Shelby and Chereen shared. It's a lot of costs and it's a lot of knowledge that we only know what we know so far, right? And I would like to add that it's a lot of fear of the unknown because we have been operating in a certain system. We know the so-called best practices, and I'm saying best practices with huge air quotes, because best practices, as I say in my field, are not necessarily what's best for either the brand or the customers or clients. And there's a lot of fear there because what we're trying to do, what we're trying to change is sometimes new, maybe not in the field, but to our clients. Because what are new practices or better practices when it comes to digital marketing, or in terms of what Chereen is doing, for example? Why do I need ethically sourced yarn or ethical packaging or recyclable packaging? There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of unknown. And if I'm tapping back to the transparency as small business owners who are trying to do better, I think it's our responsibility to be transparent with our customers and our clients and say, look, it's not going to look like what you know so far. It's going to look different. Results might be down for a bit. Having said that, you remember way back when someone talked about the 1,000 true fans? You don't need 1,000 true fans right now, because if you get 100 amazing clients, they will continue talking about you and what you do to 3 friends. And then all of a sudden that 100 turns into 300, that 300 turns into 900, and so on and so forth. So we need to talk about possibilities and how things will look like, even if in the short term they might not look like what we expect, transparently. So yeah, fear is definitely a barrier that we need to talk about more.
I think it's been more intuitive and philosophical than I expected it to be. And I like that. We're not talking like actual systems, which can get super techy and super sciencey, kind of also like shop talk in your individual industries. This is more like the 30,000 foot view of where we are, where we're headed, and what should be happening or what is happening. And I'm loving this. I'm loving this whole vibe with the group chat. I think it's been more intuitive and philosophical than I expected it to be. And I like that. We're not talking like actual systems, which can get super techy and super sciencey, kind of also like shop talk in your individual industries. This is more like the 30,000 foot view of where we are, where we're headed, and what should be happening or what is happening. And I'm loving this. I'm loving this whole vibe with the group chat.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it also just feels like it is beyond just the materials or the practices or the whatever, like Shelby's saying. It's just about the holistic big picture of being a small business owner in this time and being conscious. And I think being sustainable is just one small facet of it, but it just reaches out to so many more things. And I think at the beginning of the conversation, we all kind of touched on the sustainability of our own energy being business owners, like that form of the word sustainable, and why it's so important as a small business owner to bake in these sustainable practices for your own energy, like not just sustainable from a sustainable materials and better for the planet way, but better for your energy way that can then have more ripple effects and create more conversations and uplift more communities and all of that stuff.
I'll be honest, I thought that this conversation would be entirely different because I thought that here's the thing. In marketing, which is my field, my world, and I'm very cynical. I've been working in marketing for a while. I'll admit, I'm already a cynical person. I've become even more cynical as I started working in marketing a few years ago. I honestly thought that it would be a conversation between marketers, and I'm very sus when it comes to understanding or realizing who is just riding the wave of sustainability and ethical and sustainable and conscious marketing, you name it, which is not always easy to get to in a 1 hour conversation. So, if anything, I'm pleasantly surprised that we're talking about things that are way more important. I'm surprised that I'm the only marketer here. I'm glad to be the only marketer here, in a sense, Sarah, in that sense. But I'm also very, very glad that we have two wonderful women here who are actually doing the thing day in and day out when it comes to either a service or a product, and actually, like, I don't know, feeling the land and doing things with your hands and like doing things that, if anything, we need to listen to you more, not the other way around. So I'm really, really glad that you're here. I'm really glad to be here too, by the way.
I'm really glad you're here as well, all three of you, and to you listening, really glad you're here too and coming along on this journey with us. It can be these conversations, it's big, brave business, y'all. Like they're hard, they're hard and they're sticky and they don't have an answer. And I've shared this before, but I have gotten feedback from listeners before saying like, okay, you spent the whole episode opening this whole can of worms, but like, I didn't get an answer. I don't know, like, what do I do now? And I'm like, no, that's literally the point. Like, I think truly what I believe is that we spend a lot of time in the podcast world creating business podcasts where we're like, here's your task list. Here's all the things you should be doing according to me, the expert on this topic. And then the more of those episodes you listen to, the more tasks you have, the longer your to-do list gets of like all the things you should be doing according to the experts. Also, the more of them you listen to, the more you get competing advice. You're like, well, this person said to do this, but this person said to do this. And at the end of the day, you have to at some point kind of turn it off and be like, I just have to listen to what I know to be true. But none of those conversations are having the big, brave conversation around like that trend. And this is going to be super outdated by the time this airs because this doesn't air until the fall and we're recording it in May. But there's this trend going around at the time of recording this, and it's actually probably even on the back end of like, I almost forgot this was the whole point, right? And it shows something, right? Like your family or the planet or the environment or whatever slowing down, right? Or like being present or the things that you love the most. And I feel like that's kind of like the whole theme of this podcast. It's like when you're trying to make decisions, to your point, you've all about like email marketing, when you're trying to make decisions about your email list and your strategy for how you're segmenting and what emails you're going to send and what's the cadence and things like that. When you're caught up in like those minutia, it's so easy to almost forget what the point is. And we have ethical responsibilities to ourselves, to our communities, to our families, to our customers, to whatever it is, right? The communities that we're a part of. And that looks like so many different layered things. So anyway, these conversations can be hard. They can be really, really hard. And that's why I always try to lead with too, like, how does this topic make me feel? Because I think that I think that that's an important call out. And I hope that when I do that, I hope that you feel like, oh, that's relatable. I hope that you feel like, oh yeah, that's how it makes me feel too. Or I can understand why you feel that way. Or because I think the point is, even when we're uncomfortable, we need to have the conversation. We need to be willing to have the conversation. And I think for me, with environmental sustainability, climate impact, what role small businesses play, what is my responsibility as a business owner? Like, what does that look like? What is the impact that I'm having? How am I accidentally part of things that I don't consent to? Right? Like what does this look like? And those are scary conversations. And as I said, progressively more and more, there's sometimes things that keep me up at night, like because I do genuinely care, but I also know there's so many ways that just existing in capitalism, I'm complicit with things that don't align with my values. And what I'm learning in the big, brave business world is that actually, like, we all feel like that. Right? We all feel like that. The more we talk to each other about it, the more we can bring about change and also like try to live the most effective and sustainable lives that we can, and not just environmental sustainability, right? But like we talked about in the beginning, taking care of ourselves, not burning out, those kind of things, like being sustainable for us to continue waking up and living a new day. And so I think, anyways, just the point of this diatribe is thank you for being here and for being willing to go into the wilderness with me of like environmental sustainability. I know this only like scratches the surface, but yeah, we do only have 1 hour. So thank you so much for being here, and to you listening, we will see you next week.